Over the course of this podcast, we'll go deep into your hands-on healthcare work as a CNA and nurse, what it was like, the lessons learned, and what she's teaching others as an educator. I'm Sanjana Malgredi, your co-host, and this is
Sriram Anand, as a co-host as well.
okay. So first of all, Miss Williams, thanks for being a guest on this podcast. It's very nice to have you here.
Thank
Um,
you.
so for the first part, we're going to talk about how Miss Williams became and worked as a CNA. So let's start with your earliest healthcare role, which was a CNA or a certified nursing assistant, and you became one at just 16 years old. Can you share what inspired that and what it was like being in that role as a teen?
My initial reasoning becoming a CNA was because my grandparents raised me, and I am the oldest girl in the family. So one day I just realized that they were getting older and they would maybe need that type of care. And I did not have skills. I was only 16, I was in high school. So I felt like I needed to take on education to understand how to properly care for them if they ever needed that type of care. So that's actually what started it. That desire to also become a better person, make better decisions, led me to leave my hometown, which was Lafayette, Louisiana, and I came to San Marcos, Texas here via the Job Corps program to take on that CNA training.
Can
Oh,
you
that's
When
actually
can you also describe the process of becoming one and what responsibilities that CNAs have in healthcare?
Yeah, so typically, if you want to become a CNA, you need to go through a training program. I'm specifically focusing on the state of Texas, and that's really universal, no matter where you are in the U.S. Sometimes that training could be as short as 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and I've seen it held or over months because some people are able to do it in high school, and that schedule is a little bit more tricky to get the hours that are required. So it takes a little bit longer for that person to get it. Or if a community college is also hosting that training, I've noticed that their programs are significantly longer than what we have. So that would be the first thing, and learning skills on how to take care of people when they're in their most vulnerable places. Like that can be transferring them physically, helping them get dressed, brushing teeth, anything that we typically do every single day. A CNA can be a part of supporting someone, no matter what age they are actually in their care. Those individuals who want to become certified, they do have to sit for a state test to actually solidify that training in front of a proctor.
And what does a typical shift look like for a CNA?
So just kickstarting your shift, one thing we recommend is getting a report. You want to know what happened in the previous shift from the CNA that you are relieving, and you want to really specifically know if there's any resident that is having any concerns, like that they fall or they're not feeling well. You also want to connect with your nurse, the charge nurse for the day, to see if there's, again, any focuses for any of the residents you're, providing care for that day. Once you do that, typically what we recommend, and I've done as a CNA, is you want to have a routine. You want to know what time is dinner, what time is breakfast, what time is lunch, and any activities that some of your residents may participate in, because you're going to be providing care in between that. And that would look like showers, getting them up, getting them dressed, helping them with their mouth care, brushing their teeth or dentures. That may be transporting them to an activity. It may even be participating with them in that activity because there are some limitations there. And sometimes you do have the opportunity to be one-on-one, which is always special, where you're actually able to spend time with certain residents and do their nails and just get to know them a little bit better. But a lot of the work of a CNA is very physical, and in certain capacities, it can be emotional too.
so that's really great that you've been supporting people across the days, and I cannot imagine how packed your schedule would be.
Yeah.
The next question I have for you is, after your CNA work, you became a registered nurse. What was your motivation? The transition and how was the training different from being a CNA to registered nurse?
Yeah, my motivation was actually working at one of the worst facilities that I had worked in. When I first started, it was horrible. I mean, and horrible in the way that I noticed that the management didn't really care about the residents that resided in their facility. And these residents were specifically elderly. We didn't have the supplies that we needed to properly care for them, like wipes and different things that was very essential to their care. And we were always short-staffed. And I noticed that the management didn't, get on the ground and work with us and help us provide that care. I noticed that they didn't speak. They didn't say hello, good morning, good evening. So these are things for me. I'm Southern at heart, so it's very important to meet people, greet people, acknowledge their presence. And it really just broke my heart because when I would walk in, I maybe was assigned to 30 residents, which I know seems like a lot, but it was pretty typical. And then mid shift, I would learn that the person that was assigned with me didn't come in, and now I had 60 residents. So, in a situation like that, you really need a team effort to be able to provide quality care. And at times, you're in a situation where you're negotiating that care. So, that really caused me to have a burden to see quality care be a lot different for that specific population. And at that time, I was probably about like 18, 19 years old experiencing this. And what happened is my husband was like, you need to apply because I got married at 18. He's like, you need to get another job. You're stressed out. I know you feel like you're the only one caring for these people, but it's really impacting your health. And I actually got employed for an organization called Brookdale. It's actually one of the largest senior living facilities in the US, and they have several communities here in Texas. But that actually exposed me to more of what I call the luxury of senior living, in that these residents had all that they needed, and everyone took pride of their work. You can tell in the joy, the how they communicated with each other. Our bosses were very hands-on. They communicated with us. But in that transition, I wanted to be a part of the management. I wanted to be, because I understood that management sets the tone, right, on how we feel as those who are giving care and how those residents are being cared for. So that's actually what burned in my heart. Like, I need to do more, and I know I needed education to do that.
That's really great, and I can only think that out of all those stressful situations, were there any memorable experiences that you had while working as an RN?
Yeah, that's quite a bit. I was thinking about this question. So, the one that came to mind, I really love working with residents who have cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's, specifically because it's a very unique, I feel like it's a niche in our industry. And it's not even about, sometimes people say it takes a special person. It really just takes a person who wants to learn and understand how to connect with a person who loses their memory, right? Like, you may have walked into their room at 8 o'clock a.m., talked to them in 10 minutes later, they didn't even remember that you did that. So that disease process brings another level of emotional complications, because for that person, they're frustrated. They may forget why they even are seeing you and not their loved ones, why they're not home, the home that they remember, the feeling of home that they have so they're really trying to negotiate throughout the day what is going on. And I can't even imagine how it feels like to live in their body. But one of my many experiences with that population was really special. So we had one resident that she played the piano as a little girl. So even though she didn't have her memory, she would go to the keyboard and she would play like she had all her faculties. Like, it's the most beautiful thing to see and experience. So when I would walk into the community, I would always smile because it's important. They're trying to read you. They're trying to read, are you safe? So they would remember me just because, like, oh, hey, you're the one that smiles all the time. And I would walk with her outside of the building so she can get fresh air. And she would just share about her dynamics with her parents. And she's just like, I just want you to tell my mom I'm doing really well. Because in her mind, she was still a little girl. that was placed in a facility for not behaving well. So when we would talk, it wouldn't be this mature 90-year-old woman. In her mind, she's a young lady who's trying to prove that she's going to do better. So we would have these interesting conversations, and I just love those moments in healthcare that we're able to, meet them where they are and just be in the moment with them.
That's amazing. See, I've heard that music is a great like therapy and like good healer for like any type of disease and
Yeah.
stuff. And out of that, is there any skills or habits that you've developed as a CNA that help you succeed as an RN?
Yeah, most definitely. I, highly encourage when anyone wants to get into the industry, if they want to be a nurse, a doctor, to have some level of direct patient care is what we call it. And CNA allows you to do that because you're right on the ground, you're working with those residents with their day-to-day needs. And I believe it definitely put me at an advantage as a nurse because my career, I went into management and running those facilities and doing exactly what I had a desire to do in my teens, which was to elevate the care. So, because I understood the weight and the burden that CNAs have and the team dynamics and challenges that come up, and also the worst end of that, not having what you need to provide patient care, and also not having the backing of a management team to be on the ground if you're short staffed. It allowed me that insight. So when I became a nurse, and I managed that, it was more common for me to leave my desk and, and say, what's going on the floor? What can I help you with? Be able to look at the CNAs in their eyes and notice that today is not the best day for them emotionally, and have them go take a walk and take over their job for a few minutes so that they can take a breather, because life still happens when you're caring for other people. So I just do believe that it's important to start at that level or have some level of experience, even if it's with a family member. It just gives you a lot more insight of what that looks like. So when you're not so much connected to that as a nurse, when your team is coming to you sharing challenges or family members are concerned about care, you actually can empathize from a place of knowledge and experience.
That's great. Empathy is, a key role in being a healthcare worker, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And what were the main differences between the two roles? And how were you able to take what you learned from a CNA and apply it into the role of a nurse?
So the differences between CNA, big one is education, time in school, and licensure. So you have two different scopes of practices, is what we call it. And it just means that a CNA would never be responsible like for IV, like medications, be in charge of setting like what is the care plan for that resident. In reality, the CNA is implementing what the focuses are for that resident to some level and degree. And as a registered nurse, you're more responsible for setting that tone, understanding the needs of your patients, and everyone that works alongside you, like the licensed vocational nurse, the CNA, the PCT in some settings, they're implementing that. You also are the person that's usually talking to the doctor a lot more, advocating for labs, medication changes, and also communicating when things are not going well for that patient and advocating for what would be a better treatment plan. So your scope looks completely different, and the amount of time in training. And we do have to sit for a board of nursing test, which is to me is one of the hardest tests in the world. But so you are challenged and you are responsible for a higher level of care. Um, what was the second part of your question?
Um, what did you learn and how did you apply it into the role of a nurse?
So, looking at that transition from CNA to RN, I feel like regardless of if you're a registered nurse and you're no longer a CNA or you didn't, I feel like we're all caregivers at heart. And I think where the application is that you should never feel like because you have more training or more education that you can't walk away from your desk and support that patient and the team. And when you have CNA training, then you actually know how to do it in a safe way and you know how to do it in a better way because you've done it before and you're even able to equip your team a little bit better if they're having those challenges. But in reality, I feel like no matter how far you go in your educational training in healthcare, we should all be CNAs first. Because that person actually is going to be a lot of times the person that's going to notice the changes and they're going to know more about that patient because they're providing that most direct care. Whereas the higher you get, you kind of walk away a little bit, there's more distance from that bedside care. So you really depend on that CNA. So having that heart always, no matter how far you go, is important.
That's
Okay.
great. Yeah.
So now that we've heard your aspect or experience as CNA and RN, can you please tell us like how the responsibilities differ and how like the job of a CNA like in the long-term facility or any healthcare like facility will differ from the tasks of a RN?
Yeah, most definitely. So the CNA would be focused on what we call ADLs, which is the activities of daily living. And again, just thinking about what do you do when you first get up? You brush your teeth, you wash your face, you might fix food, or somebody might be fixing food for you, right? Just depends where you at in life. And sometimes that's full circle. Our residents probably, was great cooks, but now they're being cooked for, right? Dressing assistants, showers, going to and from places. So everything that we do, what we call ADLs, the CNA is now a part of that narrative. They are supporting based on the limitations or the capabilities of that patient or patients or residents that they're caring for. So they're very direct on even from food, assisting with feeding. And again, the level of that care really depends on if the person is more disabled, more limited physically, mentally, and it can look different per person. So that's why it's also important for the CNA to know what that looks like. And even in that role, they should always be promoting independence. So if Mrs. Smith, maybe can't put on her pants, I can do that, but Mrs. Smith can put on her shirt. And we want to keep them involved in their care. It builds their confidence and it reminds them that they are capable. Whereas in an RN role, we are looking at number one, the flow of the day, right? We're dependent upon if you're in the management, which was more where I was. I'm looking at staffing, I'm looking at quality care. I'm also having some of the most challenging conversations because if the staff member is not doing certain things, then I'm that person that's responsible in the roles that I've had. Also, I'm having very difficult conversations with family members who are at a point where they're making that transition and they're realizing that they need us and they need the support of our team. So those meetings can be very heart-wrenching because they're brokenhearted. They want to be able to provide care for their loved ones, but they're realizing that maybe safety or the burden of that load, they need a team surrounding them. In my roles, I was also responsible for the budget, right? So everything has a cost. And in order to be able to ensure that I'm able to pay the teams that are supervised well, we had to ensure that our assessments of those patient needs were accurate and that the team, the CNAs, and all that who are providing care are communicating any changes so that we can actually make sure that we're putting the right value to the care that's being provided. And then you have the endless meetings where, you're just talking about the things that are happening to all other, individuals in similar roles in that organization and working on solving problems that you may see in your facility. From a charge nurse perspective, we are passing meds, we're doing treatments, we're documenting, and we're ensuring that we also are communicating what happened to that patient. Sometimes every 2 hours we're documenting due to insurance things. But my role was more management, so I would be responsible to ensure that those things were happening.
It was really nice to get insight into both the CNA job and the registered nurse job. So, moving on, you were first a CNA before you became an RN. So, do you think it's beneficial for an aspiring registered nurse to start as a CNA? Why or why not?
I would say why and why not. I would say yes. Number one, that would always be my knee-jerk response because even as a CNA, when I worked with other nurses that had that experience, they were more empathetic. A lot of times they were ready and able to help me with patient care. When at times, if a nurse didn't have that insight, that experience, they were more hesitant. And I'm sure it may be because they weren't comfortable, or they may have felt like at times that it's not their job in reality. But when you come from, being in the role, again, you understand when a difficult situation is going on with a CNA, you have that direct insight of what that looks like. And a lot of times we're more willing to support and help our team members when we have that. And I would say no if the person feels like they don't need that insight. Like I'm always trying to understand people's journey. Some of our students come from where they've already taken care of their loved one, or they've been in healthcare situations where they've seen the care that has been provided for their loved one or themselves or their children. So they already have that, that inner knowledge of like, I want to do better, or I love the way that that person took care of my mom. And that's why I want to be in the industry. So I believe you can get that insight in other experiences, and you may feel like I don't want to do, this first. But I'm always going to lean more to the yes department because it definitely enriched how I, worked with other CNAs, even as I grew in the industry.
So, we've previously talked about how the tasks of a CNA and RN differ, but
Mhm.
is there like any circumstances or situations in which like they kind of like overlap?
Yeah, I would say with the patient care side of it, and then also to give an example of that, like at times my team members would have a resident that was refusing care, right? And if I didn't have the insight and the experience of navigating that as a CNA, it would be harder for me as now their director or manager to be able to help them with it. But because I had been a CNA for almost a decade prior to being a nurse, I knew how to have the conversation, how to analyze a little bit of why this resident may be refusing care, and how to support them in that, and then teach and train my staff on that situation. And there's actually one that comes to mind to help give a picture of that is that we had a resident who was refusing showers. And then it became a hygiene situation where they started to have an odor, which then impacts how other residents talk about them and all of the things that we actually deal with in our day to day, the social component of things. And even though the staff was trying, the CNAs, this resident just wouldn't do it. Um, so what we did, because this resident had a dementia or Alzheimer's diagnosis, we understood that he was an engineer. So I just got a clipboard, and even though he couldn't, his verbalization, his word, his skills in communication had declined because of this disease. We are who we are. Moms are moms, nurses are nurses, doctors are doctors. So even if the brain is deteriorating, those core like roles and identity is just there. We've learned that. So we know that he built buildings and he was responsible for construction. So what I did is I walked around with a clipboard and we analyzed doors. Like I would point to an area on the door, and be like, okay, what do you think about that? And honestly, at times I didn't understand what he was saying, but you can tell that he knew what this meant. And in between that, I would ease into his room and say, okay, you ready to take a shower? You had a long day. So just using that technique, that's something that if you didn't have the experience, you didn't understand the importance of knowing your residents, and I didn't have the CNA experience, I would have probably been like, well, we can't make him take a shower, and we would have been in that dynamic. So that kind of gives you an example how the inside of being a CNA informed me as a nurse on how to support my team at that time. And I think the second part of the question was, do we see the correlation between the two roles? And I would say yes, because I feel like every caregiver, as you grow and become a nurse, for instance, we are CNAs at our heart. And in situations like this, or talking to a family member, you are now able to translate and transcribe a little bit more of what you can do to be able to help them and ease their mind when they're trying to make a decision to place their family members. So even though I'm in a manager role in this setting, I'm able to lean in and be like, this is what we can do based on the challenges that you had for your loved one. And the only reason I have the insight is because I'm a CNA and I know exactly what our team is able to provide.
It was really cool how you were like able to adapt to meet the patient's needs and make the patients like improve their lives and adapt to their needs and things. So moving on, you also started your own school, which is really amazing. It's called the Williams Career School of Excellence, where you
Mhm.
like train people and become healthcare professionals, like for example, like CNAs. So how
Mhm.
has your experience as a CNA and RN informed your teaching?
All of the things, right? Like just being in the role and understanding the challenges. Also, one of the main areas of management, I manage assisted living facilities and long-term care. And just to give insight, they don't require individuals to have a CNA. So being a manager in a setting where I'm used to having certified individuals provide care now to an area where they didn't, they didn't understand how to transfer, how to support a resident's care safely at times. They didn't understand the why behind what we did. And at times we assume that because like showers, for instance, I've had a staff member say, well, I don't know how to give a shower. And for the other team members, they're like, well, you shower yourself, right? So it seems like it should correlate, but it doesn't. Like this is another person. It's not my person, right? It's this other person. So I noticed that there's a significant need to train and to train things that are really skills. It's a skill to be able to change a bed when somebody's in the bed. It's a skill to be able to assist someone outside and inside the shower safely. I mean, you might get it done, but are you considering the water that's going to go on the floor? It's the little things that we, I think, don't think of, in our everyday life. And because my management experience was in this setting, it definitely emphasized and confirmed the need for training. And that's why my husband and I put out a vision to be able to have our own training school. Also, because we went to trade school. As I mentioned at the beginning, that's how my CNA journey started. Is I went to a program, and we wanted to be able to provide free training for individuals who have a similar why. And as you saw, it evolved in my life. It started with my grandparents, but it evolved to really wanting to provide excellent care in senior living. And I feel like having a training school allows us to keep, adding individuals who have that same heart, maybe different whys, but hopefully we're adding an ingredient where we're still able to invest in the quality of care that's being given.
So, based on your experiences and your interest and passion as a CNA and RN, what are the most essential lessons you aim to pass on to your students who are just starting out as CNAs?
The big one, I say, is the secret sauce is knowing the person you're caring for. And I know in some settings that may be harder because the floor, like for hospitals, people are transitioning in and out. But this is why we also read their charts and we read records and history. As nurses, we do that too. That to me is the biggest thing you can do because the more you understand who's at the other end of your care, it humanizes them. It takes it outside of I just got to get things done. When you go into a setting like this and you're caring for others and you're so task focused, you're really going to miss an opportunity for your life to be enriched and theirs too. And when you come across challenges with that resident, and challenges can look like just refusing care that we know is essential to them being well, if you don't know them, you're not going to be able to encourage them to do the thing that we know would make them feel better. So, my biggest nugget to any person that goes through our program or who's looking at being any aspect of healthcare is know who's at the other end of your care and don't get so blinded by all of the to-dos. Focus in on who this person is. And then obviously the to-dos they'll get done, but you'll be more compassionate, more understanding, and you'll be able to hopefully read between the lines of why they may not want to do certain things, or they may be a little bit more challenging than others.
Wow, that was really insightful, and I'm sure your advice you just gave would have probably helped a lot of people who may want to become a CNA. So you've done both roles, right? You've been a CNA and an RN, and you're also a teacher, which I think is really nice. So what advice would you give to someone who's deciding between becoming a CNA or jumping straight into nursing school?
My advice would be to, when you're going through like clinical experiences, in an educational setting, you want to observe and you really want to ask really good questions about that role. One of the reasons why I decided nurse is because I actually started interviewing the people I worked with. I started asking them, like, what do you do? How long will it take you to get there? You like the job? Like, I literally started investigating a little bit more. I would also even ask them about the patients. Like, you want to not just, again, get in that educational setting and just be so task focused, because we do have objectives for our students to meet, but you want to take it in a little bit. You want to take in that environment, understand why are these other CNAs and nurses doing this job? What caused them to want to do this, and why are they still here and clocking in, and a lot of times it'll inform you a lot of what maybe where you want to go in the industry, or it may just inform you of what you may not want to do, right? Because you meet two types of people in the world, right? The people you don't want to become and people that actually inspire you to like do something different. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do in any educational setting is take it all in, ask all of the questions you can, because that's what that environment is for.
Okay, that was amazing to hear from all your schools and your advice from going from CNA to an RN. Now, reflecting on your hands-on healthcare journey from CNA to an RN, out of your extensive experience, out of all the stressful situations and wholesome moments, what have been the most rewarding parts and what have been the most challenging parts in your journey?
The most rewarding parts, I feel like for me, it's caring for others and being able to see and know that I've made their life better. And sometimes we have to define what better looks like, right? Like I didn't heal them, right? They still have the condition that we're managing. But that just may be that I spent time and I listened and I got them the medication and talked to their doctor. I alleviated a frustration that maybe they started off with that day. I just spent time with them and gave them that attention that they maybe didn't have, and they felt heard and cared for. And I say that even from a team perspective. For me, management was not just about the care for the residents. I understood that you have to care for the people caring for the people. So having to build teams, work with people, get to know people, and understand the challenges that they're facing, the caregivers themselves, and being that employer, and that supervisor that actually sees them and values them, it's rewarding. It's just rewarding to work with people in general and just know that you are an ingredient and they've allowed you in the journey of their lives. Challenging is more of where, for me, it's when there's a lack of understanding, even from when I had to interact with family members, when you really are trying to get them to understand the new needs that are now being required for their loved one. And I get it, it's hard because you're used to seeing mom independent, running the world, and now mom is in a more vulnerable situation. But it's challenging if the person on the other end is not willing to understand that at this point, I am the expert, right? And I understand where mom is, and let me help you get there so that you can actually be daughter. You can actually come into the building, not expecting mom to run the world anymore, but you're just actually able to continue to make memories with her and allow our team to take off the care burden. That is hard. That's a challenging one because it's hard for a person to grieve what they once knew and then adapt to what they now know is the reality.
Yeah, that is true.
Mhm.
And if someone is just starting as a CNA or entering nursing school under uncertain circumstances, what encouragement would you offer them?
I would say take it one day at a time because it's a
Hmm.
hard role. Like it's not an easy role at all.
Hmm.
I'm thankful that we've elevated the perception of it because honestly, we couldn't do healthcare without CNAs and caregivers. And a lot of times we've been placed in caregiving situations in our own lives. But I think if you try to think about 6 months from now, that becomes more overwhelming. So that would be the first thing I would say. Just literally take it one day at a time. And sometimes it's one moment at a time. It really just depends on the challenge and what's happening and what is this new health thing that has been now placed on the table. And the second thing is you want to find your tribe. You want to find a team that hears you, that can help you, educate you, and find you resources to be able to care for the person that you're caring for.
That's great. Ms. Williams, I think this brings us to the end of our podcast today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. It was really inspiring to hear about your journey from starting out as a CNA to becoming an RN and now helping train the next generation of healthcare workers. We've learned so much from your experiences today, and we're sure our listeners have too. Thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
You're welcome.